So we understand that we are in a few months to come, we're going for general elections, and we are going to usher in a new regime. And also at this moment is where another leader of the previous regime amepumzika kidogo, that is Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki. I will just like you to compare the leadership of Kibaki's government, we have Uhuru's government, and what to expect in the coming government, that is between Deputy President William Ruto and former Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga. Let's start with maybe in education sector, then, or let's start with politics first, then education, then the economy of the country.
Well, when we talk about regimes and you start comparing regimes, we have to really put this in context of the structures and the constitution that existed at the time when politics was taking place, because it's through politics that a government is formed. Governments are formed through siasa. And you see, Kenya is not, it's a democratic country where wananchi, they go to elections and then they elect their leaders. So when you talk about regimes, looking back at the regimes that have existed in Kenya, so far we've had 4 presidents. That is Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, who was the first president. Then we've had Mwai, who came in, the late. And then we had Kibaki, who came in, and then we now have president, the outgoing president, Uhuru Kenyatta. And now we are looking at who's next on the list to become the next president, the fifth president of Kenya, and perhaps maybe the 6th. Kenyans usually start doing siasa immediately after elections. In fact, your elections jioni watakuwa wameanza campaign for the next election. So looking at these governments, you have to really put everything in context. It's a totally different scenario right now. In fact, the next government is going to be a totally different kind of government, because it comes in under the ban of coalitions. Okay, so that's a totally different thing. And during Kibaki's regime, remember we had 2 scenarios. At first it was just President Kibaki, who ended the rulership of Mwai. Then everyone was so happy. It was in 2002. Yote yawezekana bila Mwai, everyone was singing and stuff like that. And Mwai had selected Uhuru Kenyatta as his successor. But the country believed in Kibaki and voted overwhelmingly for Kibaki. So Kibaki became the president, and he actually did 5 years. But then the next 5 years, things changed. We went into post-election violence, and then we had to have a nusumkate kind of government. So when you're comparing governments, you have to put everything in context. Moi never had a coalition government. Mzee Jomo Kenyatta never had a coalition government. In fact, those 2 regimes were autocratic. I mean, it was more like kingship kind of system. And then come Uhuru now has a totally different scenario, where PNU, TNA came together, they formed Jubilee. And you remember when they came into power, nobody came into power under the ticket of Jubilee. Okay, they were all running under, in fact, Ruto was given a TNA membership. To vie as the deputy president of Uhuru Kenyatta, because at that time there was no way you could have the president coming from TNA ticket and then the deputy president, different party. So that's when things began changing. And then also remember, we had the new constitution in 2010 that came in and changed the whole scenario. And right now, if you look at Kenya, we are headed the United States way, where we're just gonna have the Democrats and the Republicans. We're just gonna have 2 coalitions like what we are seeing right now. So things are really changing. The dynamics of education, if you look at education, if you look at Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, he was forming a country. Okay, this was just communities of people. You have this tribe living in this area, you have these people living in this area, you have this, now you come together and you try to form a country. It is a totally different scenario. Okay, because first of all, people don't even understand what is happening. I mean, a country, what is a country? What is a constitution? So you are starting from scratch, building a country, and some people understood and some didn't. Okay, so it was more of a forcing people, taking them to school. Actually, it was more of a school teaching people what a nation means, and so slowly by slowly it had to be very rough for Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, and that's why if you look at his speeches, he was something totally different. Today, if you talked the way Mzee Jomo Kenyatta talked and hurled those words that he used to hurl, someone will take you to court.
Yeah.
But at that time, he could do it. Someone was telling me that even the Mau Mau, even after gaining independence, they didn't know that they had gained independence. They were still in the bush. So Mzee Jomo Kenyatta had to go and bomb the bush and force them out of the bush. Like, they didn't even know that a country is being formed. They didn't know. So until somebody came and started schooling every community on what a country means. Remember, the colonialists are the ones who came up with these demarcations. This will be Kenya, this will be Uganda, this. So this is a president who is forming something. And that is when you have the teething problems. Unajua mtoto akianza kumea meno anaendesha, anaanza kulia ovyo, and there's nothing you can do apart from tu kubembeleza maybe here and there. Hakuna dawa. Okay, maybe painkiller too. And so he was in starting up a nation, building, not even building, laying the foundation for a nation. People may argue that it was so screwed up the way Mzee Jomo Kenyatta did it, but he had his own successes and he had his own failures. And I think maybe if we find time, we can go deep into that. Then came President Mwai, who just said, Nyayo, I will go with the Tafuata Nyayo za Mzee. Okay? And he actually did it. And as history tells us, Mwai was a very good leader until 1982. Now here, Mwai is facing a totally different scenario. Okay? Somebody is trying to overthrow his government. And that changes you, that changes everything. That is when, after that is when the late President Kibaki, actually he was so instrumental. This is a part I have not heard many people talk about. We are talking about everything, the successes alone. But it is Kibaki who was part of that. In fact, he spearheaded the team that made Kenya a one-state party.
Yes.
Okay? That part of history must be put in the book. The person who actually spearheaded and made sure that Kenya was Kanu Damu, Kanu Baba, Kanu Mama. It was the late President Kibaki. Okay, so after Moi, he inherited what he created. All the mess that came from Moi, all the corruption, the bad economy, poor education systems, and all those things. Okay, so he inherited from Moi what exactly they created. Okay, but when we look at his leadership, especially the first 5 years from 2002, Kibaki did his best because he was a brilliant mind in terms of economy.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was KRA was about collecting about 600 billion shillings per year. When he came in with his brilliant economic mind, KRA shifted to almost $1 trillion plus. Okay, around 1.7 trillion shillings every year. Yeah. And even the debt ceiling was a bit low. Yeah. And he's one person who never believed in borrowing. Okay, and he was also the kind of a person who, if he didn't see the final product, okay, so if you go with a proposal to him and say, we are supposed to do this, you must paint the final product. Because if you can't see the final product, then there's no need of starting that business. There's no need of starting that project. So he was the kind of a president who would first see the outcome. I want to see the final product first before I can actually, engage in this. And that helped a lot. Because we ended up with free education. And we've seen so many people lauding that and saying it's because of free education that they were able to study, they were able to. And Kenyans, we've had a huge problem with paying school fees. Economy ya Kenya si mchezo, na wazazi wanaumia kulipa school fees. And so you see, that was one of the major problems. Some people may argue that why take people to school yet there are no jobs. Why don't you take them to school, let them study, okay? Because this is a scholar. You see, we elected a scholar to come into power. He's a graduate of Makerere University. He's a brilliant mind. He had all these certificates and stuff, and he wanted an educated nation. Okay, he saw 20 years ahead what kind of a generation that Kenya was going to have. Okay, so he wanted to leave behind an educated nation. And then what we needed after Kibaki was a leader who would create jobs for the educated population. Okay, but what we have seen with the regime of Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto is a regime of infrastructure and massive, borrowing, and and Kenyans have been crying throughout, and job losses. I mean, this is the first time we've had major job losses, and then coupled up with COVID-19, of which you cannot blame President Uhuru Kenyatta for COVID-19. You cannot blame President Uhuru Kenyatta for Russia war that is causing jitters in the world. So when you look at all these three regimes, like I've explained, one, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta founded the nation, and he had a huge task to educate Kenyans on what, in fact, people needed to know, even whether you're a Kenyan or whatever, you needed to teach people that. Then we had Mwai, who inherited something that he didn't really understand what it was. Okay, so tujenge inchi, we ameweka foundation. We used to sing that song, Kanu ya jenga inchi, Kanu ya jenga inchi. There's a song that we used to sing, Kanu ya jenga inchi. So it was about building the nation. Okay, that's what Mwai was supposed to do, build the nation, and he did well, but he also failed in other areas, because there are so many schools that were named Mwai Primary School, Mwai wherever, Kabarak, there are so many schools. He tried, and he tried to open up roads, and tried to do some development here and there, although his regime was autocratic, and also his regime was loaded with massive corruption.